Welcome to the Power Hour, Optometry's biggest and longest running show. I'm your host, Eugene Schatzman, and today's episode is about legacy. It's about growth and the shift from being the doctor that everyone wants to see to becoming the CEO that your practice needs you to be. My guest today is Dr. Luke Small. He's a third-generation optometrist leading one of the oldest practices in Canada, over 110 years old. His grandfather helped shape the profession in its early days. His father pushed the practice forward, and Luke has taken that legacy to its next chapter. He's added a location. He's added a stronger medical model. He uses advanced technology, and he's developed a culture that ultimately drives the patient experience and helps him differentiate. But this is not just a legacy story. It's a practical conversation about what changes when you have to inherit and transform something meaningful, and you have to modernize it without losing what made it special. So we talk a lot about patient experience. We talk about culture, technology, growing pains of adding a second location. And then at some point, Luke actually flips the interview on me a little bit and starts asking me about some strategies as he transitions from being a doctor in the practice to more of the CEO role in his practice. So we talk about things like creating a vision and having accountability and having rocks in the and getting the right people in the right seats, and the transition. How do you transition patients who are really loyal to you to associate doctors in a way that actually builds confidence instead of creating concern? So lots of really interesting conversation there. Before we jump in, quick reminder to subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen. And as always, reach out to me at eugeneschatzman.com or through the Power Hour website with questions, feedback, episode ideas, or if you're looking for help and would like to work together. And now, here's my conversation with Dr. Luke Small. All right, Dr. Luke Small, welcome to the Power Hour.
Well, thanks for having me. Really appreciate being here.
Yeah, and I'll start with the remarkable fact that you happen to be at the helm of one of the oldest practices in Canada, which is quite a legacy. So maybe give the audience a little bit of background on how this legacy came to be.
Yeah, great question. I'm a third generation. Grandpa and dad were both optometrists. Both practiced in Winnipeg. I tried my hardest to get away from optometry at one point. I was environmental sciences undergraduate degree. I actually had to think about my degree. I left Winnipeg to go. I was a swimmer and ended up in Texas, down at TCU in Fort Worth. I was a horned frog, and wasn't sure if I was coming back. Wasn't sure what I was doing, and I kept coming back in the summers and working for my dad. And he kind of fooled me, to be honest, Eugene, because back then, in terms of finishing charts, he would write NCRX at the end of his assessment, no change RX, and that was it. So in terms of staying late and doing all those kind of things, I looked at his time schedule. I was like, that's a great way to work. And so now I stay much later than he ever did and those kind of things. So yeah, it goes back to the days of my grandfather working on the floor of a jewelry store in downtown Winnipeg. Wanted to move across the street and become more medical, which he was able to do.
So your grandfather was an optician?
He was an optometrist, actually. Graduated in 1938 from then the University of Toronto, now the University of Waterloo. And back then it was 2 years, which is kind of crazy. And even for my dad, it was 4 years, right? On the train from Winnipeg to Toronto, 4 years straight out of school, saw 10 patients before he graduated. When I graduated in 2000 from Cal Berkeley, and I had to see 2,000 patients, so it's just a complete reversal on those kind of things. Yeah, so it's been a long time coming, and I actually moved away. My wife is a proud Santa Barbaran. We moved to Santa Barbara. Amazing that I got her back here somehow, but maybe that's
somehow you got someone to move from Santa Barbara to Canada. That is an achievement upon it in itself. Like that could probably be the focus of an entire show, is like whatever psychological tricks or compelling psychological powers you have, Dr. Small.
So, well, I don't know about that. We've done both. We graduated. She came here. We were unmarried at the time. We were boyfriend, girlfriend, and worked for 2 years for my dad. She had an opportunity back in Santa Barbara. And we said, hey, let's do this, without really considering the cost of living in California and all those kind of things. So in those 5 years that we lived in California, my daughter was born, and I worked in 11 different practices. So I got every modality, from working in Sears to LensCrafters to county hospitals to getting to really involved with a refractive surgery center. It was a great experience. So then when we decided to come back, mainly because of the housing market in Santa Barbara at the time, it was a perfect time for my dad. He was looking to retire. He almost sold the practice a couple times. The very last one, it kind of fell through, and that's when we said, "Hey, maybe we should consider this." And that's been almost 20 years now. It's crazy.
I see. So that's awesome. And so let's talk about kind of the evolution of the practice. You mentioned your grandfather started in the jewelry store, and then it's obviously transformed. So maybe talk a little bit about how it's transformed generation to generation, and then most recently, what kind of changes you've put in, and I guess kind of what you've kept the same too.
Yeah, I think always putting patients first is a huge thing, and that any of your guests would tell you that, obviously, but I really learned that from the two of them. It's interesting, when he left that jewelry store, it was called Mitchell Kopp Jewelers, and they were right downtown, and they offered him an entire floor so that he wouldn't move across the street to this Boyd Medical Building where he was. But for him, they had just finally got the doctor title for optometrist, right? That he was involved in fighting for that and getting that and being able to, at least in Canada, get funding under our government medical insurance. So that at the time, optometry didn't have that. Fast forward years later when he was still alive and walking around our practice and looking at price tags on glasses and complaining. And I'm like, Grandpa, you're not helping by these are really expensive glasses. He was, yeah, known for doing that. And interesting, the next step with that was my dad, who wanted to be a standalone optometric practice, and we had the foresight. And my dad will probably get to see this, so he's going to walk out of here with this big old head that he was pretty smart in terms of looking for his own building, and so he found a former drugstore, a pharmacy, and they gutted it. That was 1979, and my grandpa really didn't want to move. He did not want to leave that medical building with all those other medical people. And my dad saw an opportunity, and that's what turned into Armstrong and Small Eye Care Center. And it's interesting. He told me, it was called Armstrong and Small Optical. And when my wife Gina and I joined, we changed it to Eye Care Center. And that really kind of gave him a badge of honor. He was that guy that never had therapeutics. When therapeutics came in Manitoba, he was like, I'm not doing the 100 hours. I'm close to retirement here. So it's an interesting evolution. And now for me, it's trying to, we've now 4 years into purchasing our second practice. I think I'm a little balder by going with that second practice. I know two is minimal compared to a lot of people, but yeah, it's been definitely an evolution for sure.
Yeah, and it's so it sounds like the things that stayed the same is more of like the focus on patient experience, which um, I guess maybe I will ask you. I was one trying to decide because you got a chance to when you said you worked in California at 11 different practices. How did that shape? What did you see that you didn't like, and what did you
Yeah.
see that you liked? And that kind of
Well,
shapes the way that you run your business today.
great question. And it was huge. Really, I don't know at least for me, that I could be where I am today without having done that. You know, my own mom gets mad because I said I was born with this optometric silver spoon in my mouth, and I left it all behind. And it was great. And in the end, it was probably one of the best things because in each of those practices, there was lots that I didn't like, much more that I didn't like than what I liked. And interesting, not a single one of those practices had an EMR at the time. So no one was digital. My dad went digital in 89, which is crazy. He was such a technophobe at home. But again, an early adopter on technology to say, hey, you know what, this black box, because it was a DOS screen based, it was actually out of Edmonton, a thing called Genie, and it was split screen. So you had your old stuff and new stuff, and you just function keyed everything over. And it was actually quite good and simple looking back at it. And, to be able to have that knowledge, to be able to do that. And then when I went to California, not a single person, I went back to having to write again, which I was not used to. And then having the therapeutic, at the time, the therapeutics in California, Manitoba didn't have it. So I learned all those things. And interesting, when I came back, especially from a dry eye standpoint, I'd been working with a corneal specialist for quite a while. So suddenly I had all this knowledge that a lot of people didn't, which kind of helped to set us apart and create a little bit an early stage of a specialty practice as well. I'd already been using Restasis for 5 or 6 years by the time it came out in Canada. So I had a couple, little things like that were really fortuitous for me to look and say, hey, I'm going to use this at my practice, but I'm not doing that. I'm going to do this, but I'm not going to do that. Lots of little things that I learned from a lot of great people in California for sure.
Yeah. So, what are some things that very intentionally? you've chosen to make part of your patient experience that help differentiate your practice?
Yeah, I think that goes a little bit back to staff culture, staff, how they feel, what they are. We're very family oriented. We really trust them. I've really early on stepped back from the optical side and said, "Hey, I've got experts for this." Obviously, I keep tabs on it from a numbers perspective, but they are the ones making my in and out decisions. And reps are obviously always coming to me with different things, but on that side of things, so I really feel that keeping them happy and hearing them laugh at work. I now work out of a front exam room. For me to hear that in the clinic, like I have so many patients that I hear come to our little repair area that say, "I want to work here." That there's no better compliment than hearing that. And interesting, when we bought our second practice, I thought, "Oh, we're just going to take this culture and move it right over to the next one. We'll just copy it." But people are people, and it's taken me 4 years to realize that they can be very different practices, and it can be a different patient base. It can be a different all those things. So we've done these different strategic planning sessions and things with our staff, and it's been a long time since we did it. And the last time we asked, and I remember one of our I'll call her our legacy staff, although she probably won't like that. She's been with us over 25 years. Somehow she's only 25, as she says. But she's when she talks about a mission statement, it's like, what would Luke and Gina do? Well, Luke and Gina would probably refund their money on this patient who's really not happy with these or whatever it is. Again, putting the patient first, because we know that if we can make them at least leave with a smile if they're not happy with the product, like everybody else. I think as soon as we start fighting them, they're going to tell 100 people. This is the same age old story. But if you try to keep them happy, they're going to tell 10 people. And in the world of now Google reviews and things, that's totally changed. And that's interesting. When I talk to my dad about that, it's just like, what? That's a whole other level of things, right? So anyway,
Yeah.
that's what we've been
Uh,
attempting to do.
So we're going to come back to your second location momentarily, but I am curious as a third generation because this is relatively rare to see someone who is, and also I'm sure you're aware of that. Just kind of the stats are that the third generation of a family business is usually the one that
Well aware.
does something crazy, yeah, blows it up.
Yep.
Uh,
Still waiting
so
for it.
so what's your how much pressure do you feel, and how what's the kind of the I guess the weight that you carry on your shoulders from this being like because it's not just business, it's like it's also personal. It's your
Oh,
family's legacy that you're carrying on
yeah.
your shoulders.
Yeah, I go back to my dad a little bit on that. He's very much a next chapter guy. When we told him that we were moving to California, he said, "Well, I'm sad as your dad, but we'll take your name off the sign tomorrow." Like he's just like next chapter guy. My mom, that was a whole other thing. But at the time, even for my grandfather, he was sick in the hot. I mean, it was, and of all the things he said, what did he say to me at the time? Talk about pressure. "You've stabbed me in the back and take ripped out my heart," or some crazy thing like that. My grandma stood by my side and said, "Remember when you left the jeweler? You were trying to advance yourself. This is what Luke's trying to do now." So thankfully, I had the women on my side to do that. But yeah, I think there's pressure there. But now that my dad's been retired about 20 years, it has changed. It took him he said for 6 months he was still driving to work after 40 years of going there. And now those questions and his involvement has changed. Um, People are people. So from a staff's, the HR, all that stuff, somebody in the 1970s, there's the same personalities that still exist today. Some of it is changing for sure. That's a whole other topic. But I think with that, I don't bear it too badly now. I just kind of keep on keeping on kind of thing. And that I try to be I'm fairly, I think, a positive person, get that from him as well. And so I really, in terms of the third person screwing it up, it's interesting. When he came home, he was home early. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to be an optometrist, because all my friends are like, "Does your dad work?" Because he coached us in everything because he always had time. Um, Now at the same age, that was difficult for me because suddenly the practice has changed and I'm writing letters to neurology and rheumatology and all these different kind of things. So that's made it more difficult when my kids were young. Obviously, you try to be the best dad that you can, but that's what weighed on me a little bit more. Because then when I would call my mom at 7 o'clock from the office, "Your father never did that." And that was difficult. You get patients early on that said, "Oh, your father would have taken care of this." But that's all gone now. That's all. And amazingly, we have fourth and fifth generation families. It's incredible.
That's cool.
It's pretty neat. And, one of the, I think, things that you'll appreciate is we actually created merchandise. And I didn't even tell him. I should show you. I'm going to little show and tell here. So that was his picture. And
That's
I don't know.
cool.
Well, you see it, that little. And so I didn't even ask him. I just stuck it on his car. And he's like, who the heck is that? He had no idea. He had a mustache for like 6 months of his life. And didn't particularly like the picture, but it stayed. And so now we have, beer koozies and stickers and badges and pins and staff. And interestingly enough, industry asks for it all the time. It's pretty neat. Yeah. Kind of
Really?
fun.
So so it really, and part of it is that legacy, but I think it seems like you guys have really developed a brand around your name in both the community and it, I mean, I'm just kind of picturing the practice. It's sounds like it's a pretty fun place to work,
We try.
and and you've got a reputation in the community as such. So that's overall. I mean, kudos to you for continuing and seeing the next chapter of that legacy business. Now, you
Appreciate
know,
that.
what are this is maybe a slightly harder question, is like, when you took over, what had to change right away? What were you like, ooh, like, it's kind of like
Because
when you buy a
we kind of
house,
took,
like,
yeah, we kind of took over twice because we graduated, we came in, Dad, we got to get rid of this DOS system. We got to get to Windows. And suddenly we switched to a local company that, at the time was doing more chiropractic type EMR type stuff. And they just kind of made it optometry. And we changed the name, as I mentioned, in terms of from optical to eye care center.
hmm
Therapeutics didn't come in till the second time we came home. So we came back. My dad never worked in '08, so we worked together in 2007, and a lot of those things. It was starting to look at metrics. That was another big one that not that he didn't. His was on paper. He kept track of things in pencil and graph and all those kind of things. He was probably a little bit ahead of his time. Um, but that was a big one. I think we started to get more involved in the community surrounding the practice. Now we're, you know, from school stuff to recently we helped plant trees in the area. And that's now gone on to the next one. And did we really need the new practice? And that might lead into these other questions on that new practice, but we were just busting at the seams. And it's only, I was going to say 5 kilometers. So it's like 3 miles apart, these two practices, but it kind of fell into our laps. Kind of a tough story because the previous owner had passed and his widow approached me about, and he passed early and she approached me and I was sort of like, oh, wasn't even on my radar, was not at all on my radar. And, again, I just thought, oh, we'll just cookie cutter this thing and make it the next one. And one of the greatest quotes I got from a good friend of mine, he says, Luke, making those two practices exactly the same is like your two kids being exactly the same.
mm.
And it's tough. It does happen. Yeah. But
So
both
what
now are,
happened when you got the second practice? What are some things that you noticed that you're like, okay, this is not necessarily up to my standards? And what were some things that you noticed that were like, ooh, I can learn from this?
yeah. Well, one, I was already in touch with him because he had brought in some dry eye specialty stuff. It was a smart uh, business play because when you drove by the practice, one side, there's two sides to the building. It's right on the corner. So you had the name of the practice in the front. On the side, he branded that as eye spa. So I assumed it was two different complete entities. And what he was actually doing is he had an IPL device and an RF device right in one of his extra exam rooms, and he was just doing it in there. And so because I was doing so much dry eye at the time, I was referring those patients to him. So when we took that over, we also took over basically a specialty practice. Timing was great. And for, again, some things fall into your lap. I'd known our recently retired grad from Chicago. She was just coming back. She grew up near this practice. I said, hey, you can have full time. She was interested in dry eye. So things kind of fell into place. But, there was no, we've used an Optomap since 2004. So now this is 2022 and I'm so used to practicing with an Optomap. I got to have an Optomap. I have a specific OCT that I like, oh, we got to get this OCT in there. Oh, I'm used to a digital phoropter. Let's get, those kind of things. So some of those things he had done, but some of those things we definitely needed to change. And particularly operationally, we needed to change some things just to, even from frame inventory. I mean, you go all the way through. There's lots of stuff that needs to be changed when you're dealing with that for sure.
Yeah, you mentioned this whole concept of patient experience, which is started by the staff culture, right? I think your hypothesis is that patient experience is the product of your staff culture. And was their culture similar to yours? Did you have to do something to change the culture? Did you have to? How did you adapt?
Yeah, I think we're so much more medical, and nothing against how he was practicing or what he was doing, but we were a much more medical practice than he was. So that needed, and again, the technology. He was just getting into that. He had just brought in an OCT and was starting to promote that. Obviously, he was doing a much quicker turnaround and pace than that for sure that I was used to at my age, I'll say. So that was changing a little bit. Now a third of my patients are glaucoma patients, and that's just because I've taken on my dad's and as they've aged, those kind of things. So pulling those patients over to a new area in town. It's funny, it's only 3 miles away, and a lot of my patients that have more birthdays, I'll say, were not so happy about having to change, right? And those are those patients that are going to drive there the day before to make sure that they knew there was parking and all those kind of things. But
Hmm.
yeah, so I think with that, it was that was a little bit tougher, and no, now we're down to just one of the remaining staff that was originally with him. And randomly, she used to work for us, a decade ago. So we kind of have come back together. She's one of our main dispensers there, so it's worked out well.
Got it. Got it. No, so it sounds like the staff culture had to kind of come in from a outside sweeping gesture rather than
Right, and
necessarily
it
inside.
and the former his former manager was really close with him, and I never really, and that was my mistake to on a human side, is that they had all gone through this pretty massive traumatic event. And so to stick around there was tough for them. And that took me a little, I thought, oh, are you leaving because I'm changing things? And I remember that manager, she was very straightforward, and she just said, no, this is really hard for me to come here every day. Right. We were making some pretty major changes to her for sure. But I think it was also the traumatic event of having that happen. So then
Yeah.
trying to continue his legacy as well a little bit, as best we can, and trying to, and then also now we've just rebranded, which I had a little bit of a hard time. So we now call it's an area of town called Osborne Village. Osborne Village has been around since the 70s. Kind of what used to be called a beatnik area, I would say, is now there's some gentrification that has gone on with it, and it's always changing. Um, and now I think we're going to be a part of that. And now we call it Armstrong and Small in the Village. And I think we're all, even the staff there, suddenly they get to wear the logo and they're wearing the shirts and they're getting the merchandise and those kind of things. So they were excited for that. From my perspective anyway.
That's good. No, that's awesome. So we'll talk about your personal transition after the break, kind of going from being an optometrist in one location to being kind of a manager of two. But before we do that, I just wanted to zoom in a little bit of in this context of technology. You mentioned technology quite a bit. You've also mentioned that your dad was an early adopter of the EHR, and did you say in the late 80s?
Yeah,
There,
89. Crazy,
yeah,
right? Like he was, and for him it was just to get rid of paper files. Like he was running out of room. That was his whole motivation. Let's put it in this black box. That's all he knew at the time.
yeah, no, and that's very, very tech forward. So, talk to me a little bit about the role that technology plays in your practice or in both of your practices right now, and really how you're using it as a mechanism of differentiation as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And everyone is catching up. It's constantly, as we've got to, what are we using that's somewhat different? And now there's so much out there. You kind of have to make a decision at these shows and expos and trade shows. Okay, what is actually going to help me? And what piece of the puzzle is this going to be, from whether that's a axial length measurement? Are we going to go down that road? We're going to do mybography on every single patient because we're trying to fill these dry eye spots. We're constantly thinking about that. And then also trying to look at from, okay, if we purchase, what's our return? Obviously the ROI on all those kind of things. So that we've gotten better at planning for. We recently just purchased a new OCT. And my personal thing with that is because I use a local, it's a Canadian company called Care One, maybe a little bit of a shout out, but it's a telemedicine AI platform that I'm using constantly for my glaucoma patients. And now within their, and again, if it's okay, I'm going to use some industry names here. That it's a Zeiss Forum platform that can automatically load right into that. So when I saw that I could do that, okay, then I want Forum to be able to do these things. And not all of our associate ODs, and especially maybe even my wife, is like, I'm not doing that, right? So you have to kind of make sure that they're aware. I've made that mistake of charging ahead with this, what I think is awesome, and all excited, and you get back and telling the staff, and they're like, what are we doing? Why are we doing it? And then the whole other part of that is, how do you tell somebody over the phone, as you know, you and I have chatted about, how do you portray that? Why are you more expensive? And how does that staff person say that, or AI say that to that patient that's on the phone? Yeah.
Right. Right. Exactly. And I think that's part of it is using the technology as a differentiator. But there are a lot of practices that uh, kind of feel apologetic for saying things like, "Oh, yeah, we have to charge you this much money to do this and that during your exam." And there are some practices that are so unapologetic and and it comes off as like we just believe this is the standard of care, and because everybody at that practice believes it, it comes off as like, well, sure, you could go to a different practice that doesn't really have these tests or doesn't have this technology, but we would be underserving you if we weren't doing this for you. And so, like everybody in that, when it comes off, it's really not even what you say; it's kind of how you say it. At least in my experience,
I agree.
when you're describing the fact that this specific patient experience costs more money. Um, the truth is that there are patients who are going to be very excited to pay for it once they realize what the outcome to them is or what the benefit to them is. And it sounds like you guys are well on your way with that, but you're absolutely right. I think a big challenge is, of course, adoption internally, because it's not that you could buy it and you could provide the service, but it's the fact that your staff need to be excited about it, your associates need to be excited about it, because
My wife
otherwise
needs to
this
be
thing's just
excited about it.
right. Who
Yeah.
also works in your practice, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Um,
Yeah, optometrist partner. Yeah,
and so, if everyone's not excited, then this thing just becomes kind of an underutilized, a very expensive coat rack.
100%. Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. So when we come back from the break, Luke, I'd like to spend a little bit of time thinking about what your transition is going to look like and how you see the future of this legacy practice and what your role is going to be in the future of this legacy practice. So we'll be right back on the Power Hour.
Hey there, it's
Right.
Eugene, and I want to let you in on something. So, you've been to conferences before, you come home fired up, and then Monday morning hits and it's back to the grind. The ideas don't stick, the plan never gets made, and 6 months later, your practice is in the same place. So, I know that pain. I've been to those conferences with you, and that is not happening at this new event called I Care Boss Live. You've heard the story of I Care Boss, and now there's an event, I Care Boss Live. It's September 16th through 18th in Cleveland, 2.5 days. We're bringing together 200 of the best practice owners in eye care for a one of a kind event that combines speakers, peer learning, mastermind groups, and industry innovation, all designed around one goal. You leave with a 90-day plan and you can actually execute it and get stuff done. And we're going to tackle some real stuff: exam only rates, revenue per patient, people problems, leadership, AI and technology, specialty growth, the things that keep people up at night. We're going after it. And we're doing it in a room full of practice owners that are just as serious about growth as you are. This is not a conference. It's not a seminar. It's something different. There are only 200 spots. So if you want to be in on this, this is not publicly announced, just on this podcast. Go to thepowerpractice.com, click events, click apply now. This is invite only. It's not for everybody. So you have to apply. We'll ask you a few questions. And if it's a fit, we'll invite you to register. This event, I Care Boss Live, is going to sell out. Do not sit on it. I invite you to apply right now.
All right, we're back on the Power Hour with Dr. Luke Small. So, Luke, we talked about in the first half of the show, we talked a lot about how this legacy practice has changed hands. You've made changes throughout the throughout the transitions, and what the practice looks like now. So where do you see the practice going in the future? And by the way, do you anticipate that there'll be another generation that ultimately takes the reins?
Yeah, well, I'll answer the last one first. Right now, no. So we've got our daughter's in third year at McGill in Montreal, loving Montreal, doing psychology like her mom did an undergraduate degree, wondering what she's going to do. At one point, she says, "Well, maybe optometry, but not in Winnipeg." In your early 20s, Winnipeg gets a bad rap, and then everyone moves back here because the cost of living when they're in their 30s and have kids. But who knows? And my son, he's about to graduate high school. He's off to the University of Minnesota. I'm going to be a Gopher dad, which is only Minneapolis is only 7 or 8 hours from here. So we're excited about that. But I really think what's different for my dad and myself is that my parents rarely ever talked about the practice. My wife and I, unfortunately, have to talk about the practice. We're both the two business owners. We're partners in life. We're partners at home. So especially, and we always seem to never be ready to talk. Like we've learned, okay, before bed, so that we're both not can't sleep. We're not going to get into this HR issue, or we're not going to get into those kind of things. So sometimes it's at breakfast, and we're both racing to work. We're even going to the same building sometimes. We learned a long time ago not to go together. I'm probably too slow in the morning, and I stay too late in the evening, right? So we've figured that all out. But our kids have heard the business side talk for so long that I'd be really curious if they ever were to go into a small business, because it can be overwhelming and they hear the stress that we have. Maybe it'll send them off
Mm.
to a different, who knows? And I never say never, because I got out of it for a while. And at my undergraduate degree, I was going to sit in a lake and do water samples and be quite happy. And yeah, but I kept coming back. So, I think both kids could do it, but who knows what that's going to be like, and how do we even plan for that once we get closer and closer to this retirement thing? I think is in terms of, where we're going forward, people ask me all the time, "Oh, are you going to add a third?" And really, after going through that second, I don't know that I may lose a wife if I do, if I decided to do that. I say that jokingly and unjokingly, but it's a lot. But right now, I think all what I'm most excited about, Eugene, is all these back burner items that I'm finally going to have time for. So at 40, I wanted to work 4 days a week and do 1 day of admin. My goal at 50 was to be able to have 3 days. I'm going to be 53 this summer and finally just getting to that goal. We've got a couple great new associates that are movers and shakers, and they do a great job, and their capture rates are high, and all the things that we would look for in associates. And we knew them during undergraduate. They came to us looking for jobs. So we knew what we were getting when they were coming out of school, which has been great. We know how they're going to treat staff. We know how they're going to treat patients, where there's no surprises. Back in the day when my dad would hire anybody with a pulse, that was his quote, because he just needed somebody to help him with his backload of things, of his backload of patients. Those times have changed. We're pretty picky with who we bring in as doctors, and we're proud of our doctors team. And like we said with the staff in the first half, it's the same with the docs. They've got to have some buy-in, and they'll hold my toes to the fire now too. Like I really get them involved. I'm a big proponent of making sure the associates know what's going on and that they have a say in that too. We're constantly now with two places, who works where, those kind of thing. We want to make sure that everybody's happy and paid fairly and all those kind of things that go on. So as we move on, I think if I can go down to 3 days a week, a lot of those things that my manager, so we have a manager, our clinic manager, Chelsea. I'll do a shout out to Chelsea, who's been awesome for us. She does both clinics, and it's a lot for her, and it's a lot for both of us. And along with my wife, we're managing all of that. And so we're constantly, oh, we should do this. And honestly, we're another shout out to iCare Pro. We've been with iCare Pro for nearly a decade, and there's so many ideas that they provide us, from marketing, from, oh, yeah, you name it, to just about everything, from social media to the SEO, all that stuff. It's so much. I used to keep a list, and I would have 50 things, and we'd be able to do one or two. And I remember one of our reps at the time said, "Hey, if you can do one or two, that's great." And any new OD who's looking at being worried about spending money on those kind of things, partner with somebody from industry who has 50 other accounts through North America, sure knows what they're talking about, right? Learn from them, glean from them, pull those things. So now I'm finally going to have ideas to finally be able to do that. One idea, we were talking about, how do we show what an exam is like? Well, I love meta technology. I'm a big outdoors guy. I love it for mountain biking, cycle. canoeing, you name it. I love having my metas on to do. It's replaced my GoPro completely, skiing, snowboarding, all that stuff. So I want to walk through the practice with my metas filming. And I'm sure this has been done, but we kind of like this idea of even putting your head into the Optomap so that my new 75, 80,
Mm.
16, 5-year-old patient, and then do we get a 5-year-old to do the same thing and walk through, right? It's all video. We know how important that is now. So anyway, that's where I foresee my role, that I can make it the best staff experience, best patient experience, best doctor experience. And so my flip to you for this, and knowing your experience and what in terms of, as I tried to transition myself into the CEO, now you've heard my story. What do you suggest that I focus on? Right. I've got lots of back burner items, all those kind of things. But if you had to give me some very specific things that I should be, as I go forward, what are your suggestions? I'm going to flip this on you. I've seen other guests do this to you.
Yeah. So this is going to be fun. So let's do it this way. f- I've heard you say a few things that you really like or that you want to do, but let's figure out from an impact standpoint. So, if you're going to be the best possible CEO for a practice, let's start at the top. Is there a clear vision for the practice? Have you written a vision in present tense that's 3 years out that everybody in your organization, both locations, can see clearly what the practice will look like, what the patient experience will look like, what the entire sort of feel of the practice is going to look like, and also how you're going to get patients and what your and what your all your metrics look like too.
I have not done that. So thank you. There's not step one.
So
I know
step
in
one is this:
my
the
head.
CEO has to play the visionary role, unless you have, that some combination between you and your wife. Somebody's got to play the visionary role. So, and the reason I say that, Luke, is that I start with the vision for you because I think you know what you want your practice to look like. But if you can document this, and you can use AI to help you, and I could probably even give you a bunch of questions that you can, and I'll happily share this with anybody who listens to the show. Is that there's a few questions you can ask yourself about your practice, and then as you start answering these questions, I would just talk into yeah, an AI assistant like ChatGPT or Claude or whatever.
Mhm.
And as you talk, you say, okay, now help me write a vision. Now the vision needs to be 3 years out, present tense, very similar to the concept of Cameron Harold's Vivid Vision, also from Canada, I believe. And what will happen is it'll crystallize for you a picture of what the practice looks like, and then it'll crystallize for your staff a picture of what that practice looks like, and then you can start saying, okay, well, that's 3 years out, so that's present tense. So right now we're recording this in June of 2026. If we are so now this will be, what does my practice look like in June of 2029? And so you say it's June 1st, 2029, and we are X, right? And then all of a sudden, all these things start flowing in. So that vision, why do you need a vision? It sounds a little hokey, but like it gets into real business concepts real fast, because then you can say, okay, well, I said we're going to be seeing X number of patients. I said we're going to be, a true dry eye center of excellence, and I explained what that means. So how do we go from where we are now to there in 3 years? Well, what that means is we have to start thinking about what's our annual goals, right? And what are our annual rocks going to look like for the next 3 years? What do we have to accomplish this year in order to even make that vision possible, right? And so you start identifying what those rocks are, and then you start cascading those. And as you start cascading those, you say, okay, well, for example, I'm uh, paraphrasing, but you might say, we really want to make sure that 1 out of 5 patients that we're seeing for comprehensive eye exam gets treatment from us for dry eye. And we have lots of different dry eye modalities available, and we want to be getting referrals for dry eye from all the surrounding PCPs and possibly other ODs. And we want to have, so okay, so what are the things that need to be done this year in order to make that possible? Well, there's probably a standard of care. We probably need to test some things. We probably need to figure out, well, what percentage of patients are now versus what percentage will be need to be in the future, and how do we what operational change do we have to make now in order to enable that in the future? So this is what I think the role of a good CEO is to look at that vision and then get their staff involved in having a conversation and say, what needs to exist today in order for us to be able to accomplish that vision in the future. Or the just as good of a question, and it's not a bad one, because what issues exist today that prevent us from being able to get to that in the future. And to me, issues are just opportunities, and they're money. Like literally just money that needs to be uncovered and
Figured out.
cleaned up and then put in the bank, right? And
Yeah.
resolved. And so you got to be able to facilitate the conversations that ultimately lead that way. And that's where I would start as a CEO. And then, once you kind of identify, okay, well, that's where I'm going, who do I need to make sure that gets there? And so part of what you're doing is if you're stepping out of the exam room and you're taking a leadership position, you're probably also going to need to start looking for leaders in your organization to help you accomplish your growth goals. So then we turn to the kind of the people side of the equation and say, okay, you were talking about like really cool, fun things you can do, like walking through the practice with metas and that kind of thing. I would do the zone of genius exercise. We mentioned this in our book. I also think Dan Sullivan, another famous Canadian that I admire quite a bit. Um,
There's lots
he
of us. Who knew?
yeah, yeah, no, it's a great,
We hide.
great talent pool. So Dan Sullivan has this concept of unique ability, and we kind of translated it to zone of genius. But the reality is that whatever you call it, it's the work that you're both truly passionate about and that you're really good at doing. That's the stuff where you could spend as much of your time doing that, then your work doesn't feel like work. You're insanely much more productive, and your output delivers the greatest amount of impact. And so the real challenge for a great CEO is to try to line people up into their zone of genius. And I use this
Sure.
example because
Yeah.
it's kind of
Yeah.
it's kind of a silly example, but it's true about me. Is for a while, Luke, in my business, up until we had, I don't know, about 50, 60 employees, I I thought it was I thought I was the best at doing payroll.
Mm.
And so
Mm.
the reason I believed I needed to do payroll was because, first of all, I didn't want any drama on the staff of, if somebody did payroll, then somebody knows how much everybody makes. And then, that could potentially lead to drama. And what if that person, ends up at the bar with the wrong person and like that kind of thing, right? Like, so that
Yeah.
was one.
Yep.
The second thing is I had just done it forever. Like since the start of my business, I did payroll. So I was inherently pretty good at it. I was very efficient, although it was definitely one of my least favorite things to do. So if payroll was due on Tuesday at 7 p.m., what would happen is I would start it on Tuesday at 6:32 p.m. because I knew that it took me approximately half an hour to do, and sometimes I wouldn't do as thorough of a job, and I would sporadically check certain things that I probably should have checked more, and sometimes I would get distracted by really great shiny things that I enjoyed a lot more. Like if a client called at 6:20 p.m., of course I'm going to take the client call. I love talking to clients. I don't love doing payroll. And so when I'm off the phone at 6:55, I'm like, ah, crap.
Yeah.
I'm pretty
I got
sure,
to finish this.
people are
Yep.
going to be paid a day late, and I'm going to have to apologize to everybody for no really good reason except for I procrastinated because I didn't really like this job or this work. But the thing is, this is what happens is a lot of people get trapped in doing work that they are competent at. So they're high skill, low passion, right? So I'm competent. I'm not. I'm not passionate about it. I'm just competent at it. So inherently, I'm good. Therefore, there's no performance issue. Therefore, I just keep doing that work, and that could be you. That could be people on your staff. And the truth is that if I could free up that half hour or 40 minutes, or to do the job right, maybe it's 2 hours. If I could free up those 2 hours and move them into a zone of genius for me, which is competent and passionate, If I could just move my work there, you would get way more output and way more impact from me. And then there's probably somebody, and I actually found that person when I really started looking at it, who is extremely competent and also very passionate about doing payroll. And
Yeah.
that person
There's not
turned out to
there's not
be
many of those around.
actually,
So if you can find someone, there's not a lot of people passionate about payroll. So,
well, yeah, yeah. Well, that's the thing is you gotta find those people. And so for me, that person actually turned out to be outside my organization. I asked around, and it turns out that of all people, my attorney was like, "Hey, actually, there's this woman who wants this part-time job, and she's trying to build this payroll business, and I'd love to introduce you guys." And she literally freaking loved it. Like this was her thing. She absolutely loved the act of doing payroll, and I was like, "Oh, this is great." And I was like, "Why?" I was so dumb to, for what she charged me. I was so dumb to not have her do a much better job, a much more professional job, and to answer all the questions that inherently came up. Because you feel like, oh, well, it's 30 minutes, but it's also like, then somebody has a thing, or somebody forgot to submit their hours, or somebody did this and
yeah.
somebody didn't do that. And then all of a sudden you're like also stuck answering all the questions related to that task. And so that was also my least favorite questions to answer. And then my staff thought I was unresponsive because they send me messages about this. And I'm like, I don't want to look at this right now. I want to look at this other fun thing that's
Look at
like
this
really
shiny
good.
object over here. Yeah. Well,
Right.
and okay,
Or
so
the
let
stuff
me
that I'm just more passionate about, right? Like a
right.
client had an exciting development. I'm way more excited to work on their business than I am to look at your timesheet. Like that's sorry, but like that's
But that's how, yeah. So let me ask you this. So our biggest issue for my wife and I is that we're transitioning out of that exam room. Those staff have seen our family for sorry, those staff, those patients, lots of our patients. I haven't had new patients in 5 years. I've been fortunate enough to do that. So I've created these long-term relationships.
hmm
So what's the best transition out of that? Is it me actually introducing that situation in the exam room with that patient when the time comes that, hey, I'm decreasing my load? Because once you look at, every Friday, that's going to be a lot of patients over, a year's time, a 2 years time, or whenever they're getting recalled, that I've got to move over to somebody new. We also thought about videos where, I would say, hey, this is my optometrist. This is who I see. This is our associate. I have full-fledged, we're not picking them just out of the blue. These are people that we trust, and they'll do a great job with you. And I think I mentioned to you too in the past, where once you start to look at capture rates, and once you start to look at those kind of things, I shouldn't say happy, but my newest associates are better at that than I am. I'll gladly admit. And because have these long-term relationships, I'm chatting about their grandkids playing hockey, right? And then, oh, can you read the chart? And they enjoy it. They love it. Again, created the relationship that makes them want to come back. But how do I transition that to a new associate who I feel I've got full utmost and multiple associates? What are your thoughts on that? You've seen enough practices do this. How do I transition, my wife transition out of this best?
Yeah, and I would be careful with saying things like I'm decreasing my load,
Yeah.
because you really don't want the patient to feel unimportant. I would
Yeah.
frame
Because
it
then
as
you're
a very
you're
positive.
picking them as a person you're pulling out. I see. Yeah. True.
Right, right. I would frame it as a positive, Luke. I would say something like, um, you know, Dr. Smith has spent the last few years really getting some additional training and some of the latest training in the latest technology that can help patients just like you. So I have hand personally selected Dr. Smith to see you going forward. He is going to be a little bit more available than I am. And that's why I want him to be able to see you. So what have I done? I've just given you three positives.
Yeah.
So and so is really
Yep.
smart. They're very well informed. Number two is they have more availability, so it's easier to get in to see them. And number three is I have personally selected them, so I've transferred my authority to them. Right. So I've just given you three positives for how to have that conversation. You can have that conversation in three different ways. One of those conversations is you can actually see the patient in person and introduce them and introduce the doctor and say, this is going to be, Dr. Smith, and Dr. Smith is going to do the exam today, and I'm here observing. I don't love that choice. It seems like the most natural handoff, but like what'll happen is the patients naturally kind of they're anxious the entire time because there's two doctors. You don't,
Yeah.
the person who's being watched that doesn't feel great. And I would never do it at the end of an exam to say, oh, Dr. Smith is going to see you next time, because then they may never come back. Right. That's because at that point they're like, oh, I'm not going to get to see my favorite optometrist anymore. So I would do it either on the phone when they call to schedule or to confirm, and I would do it and these are not mutually exclusive. I would do it, like you said, by video and or letter, is to when a patient calls or when you confirm that appointment for the, next Friday or whatever that,
Hmm.
and they're going to see Dr. Smith instead of Dr. Small. What's going to happen is at that point, that's when the messaging comes in, is that, Dr. Small has handpicked Dr. Smith to see you. Now, Mrs. Jones, you're going to be seeing Dr. Smith. Now, Dr. Small hand selected Dr. Smith to see you, and he's going to send you a video about that, because that's them together. Dr. Small is still part of the practice, but Dr. Smith is a little bit more available, has some of the latest training, and has some of the best, and has access to some of the best technology. So Dr. Small thought you should see Dr. Smith, and you'll certainly be able to provide some feedback on your visit to us after your visit, right? So it's like, I'm making it all about the patient benefit, nothing about you. I honestly, I don't want to hear that my doctor is not, I once heard this in a recorded call, and I ended up having to call the owner and tell them that this is like really bad. There was a patient who called and said, I want to see let's call him Dr.
Whoever it
Jones.
is.
And
Yeah.
and the person said, oh, well, he's not really available for a while. So, like it's like 2 months out, and like he only does one Tuesday a month. So like that'll be blah blah blah. And this patient's like, oh, well, okay, I could probably wait till then. And it's like, well, but it's kind of hard to see because he's focusing more on the business now, and
Mm.
less on the, and less on patient care. And the guy was like, oh, okay. Well, I mean, I guess, just like book me when you can. I really like him. And then this person's like, okay, well, I'll book you that Tuesday, but if something comes up, we may have to book you like a month out from that. It was like, I heard this and I was like, focused more on the business and less on the patients. Are you kidding me? You can't ever say that. And so anytime you say I'm scaling back or I'm doing whatever, it's just like, it's not about it's got to be about them. It's got to be about the benefits to the patient. And so I would do that as your framing of the transition.
How many patients have said to me as they realize that I'm having more birthdays that, are you retiring? And if you, and, or I, if you are decreasing that patient, as the patient picks up on that, even if I haven't said it, well, for sure you should. You need to take care of yourself. I'm worried about you. So you're working too hard, but don't get rid of me. That's
That's right. That's right.
all. But so, sometimes too, I'll be at the practice. I'm there on a Monday. That's my administrative day. I've said hi to Mrs. Smith, who is there, and how are the grandkids? Oh, are they still playing hockey? Right? Whatever it is in our world that we're talking about. And then they go see the exam, and now they've almost forgotten that they haven't seen me, because they did see me. I almost just need to be like, we keep joking that I need some suspenders like a Walmart greeter and just kind of hang out. When you walk into our main practice right now, I've got a classic old baby blue optometric chair and the green one. And the blue one was my dad's that he bought out of school. The green one went way up northern Manitoba from in our province for 20 years and somehow landed back with me. And so it's kind of neat. I could sit in those chairs and just greet people all day. I mean, that's not maybe the best use of my time, but and it's interesting. You just need a quick hello even, and they're excited. So I agree. I appreciate those points, because that's honestly what my staff is probably most concerned about. And obviously losing patients when we say that you can't see Dr. Small for 4 months. Oh, we've got these great people, handpicked, all those kind of things. Oh, I'll just go someplace else. That's the worst for us. That's what we're trying to avoid at all costs. So then that wording
Yeah. And
becomes really.
and like we were saying earlier, it's the people have to believe. So it's just like if your people truly believe that and this is up to you to make sure that they understand. So some things that you can do for the staff is they can sit in on the exams, or they can go shadow an optometrist for a day, especially one that you're transitioning your patient load to, so they can see how great that optometrist, his or her bedside manner is, and they can see how much patients love them, so that they can really buy in. And if they see any issues, they should very openly be able to tell you what their feedback is on that exam. But in general, it's the I want to get to know how Dr. Smith practices, so that I can
Good idea.
happily and
I like it.
very honestly refer Dr. Small's patients to Dr. Smith.
Especially on
But
that phone
that
call
could
when
be
they're
one
getting,
of your goals.
yeah, I
That
like it.
that could be one of your rocks, because in your
Yep.
vision, you could very well say that, we've built out two or three associates to a point where they have a full schedule and an amazing capture rate and loyal patient base, and they're constantly generating referrals, and on and on and on, right? And so how would you do that? Well, you would have to make sure that you start breaking that down, and it's somebody's job this year. One of those goals this year needs to be to help make sure that that script is bulletproof, Luke. That you've tested that script, and that it sounds good, and and you've tested it with a couple people who are kind of like, who would tell you if it's BS, and you've tested the script, and you've tested the approach, and it feels really good to the patient to say, oh man, like I'm getting a guy who like really specializes in the thing that I'm really worried about.
Yeah. I like it. And now I'll be sending that script to you to make sure it's bulletproof too. But yeah, I think those are the kind
Happy to help.
of, thank you. Those are the kind of things that, that can just sit on the back burner. I keep using that back burner items, as you know, and it's trying to tear that Band-Aid off to get to them and to be able to have that time. And that's what I'm looking forward to is getting some time back. But I agree with you on all fronts, and you talk about this with all your guests, is how do you spin that to make it a positive, right? How do we I use the tear the Band-Aid off and flip it. And that's exactly right. And how it's done wrong, right? And how are we saying something? And every doc knows when they hear their staff, sometimes the wording on the phone, well, that's not how I would have said that. And then I might make a little note on the side of the paper, but I don't talk to that staff person for 3 months about it, right? So those kind of things are trying to get better, and goals
Yeah.
and those.
And I would go even a little bit further, because as the CEO, you're going to have to zoom in on this. Is I
Absolutely.
would listen to calls where these types of things happened. I would have staff self-document when they brought up, Dr. Smith versus Dr. Small, and how many times they scheduled the appointment. And I would just make sure that this is just like anything else in our business, is that if you say it with an apologetic tone, it's gonna come off wrong. So it's not just the script. It's the second I say, "Ooh, this is all gonna cost, $621." The second that I say that, I could have said exactly those words with a completely different tone, but like all of a sudden the patient is doubting their decision to, go through all of this stuff.
Right.
Whereas
Instead
if
of
I
saying
just say
it's
it with
only
a
six.
completely different approach, and I really believe that this is truly the best outcome for the patient, then it's not apologetic, then it's just matter of fact, and and I'm just here delivering some really great news for you.
And look what you're getting out of this. And we can even go through this bit by bit to show you exactly what you're getting for this amount that you're paying today. Yeah, I
Yeah,
agree.
exactly. And it's as simple as like, you are going to see amazingly well, and you're going to get to drive at night without halos, and you have when you work on the computer, your eyes aren't going to get tired anymore. And for the whole year, it's only $621. Completely different mindset than oh man, I can't believe this is all 620. Are you kidding me?
Yeah,
Like, this is a lot of money. Like, I know it's a lot, but like, you are getting the best. Like, that's a
it's
very
all about
different
tone,
approach.
all about
Yeah.
presentation. I agree. 100%.
Right. So,
Yeah.
and it's hard to fake. So that's why I say, genuine belief and this is where it goes to your earlier point, kind of what inspired my point is that I think the genuine belief that that's like that culture of patient experience and the culture of like truly enjoying what you do, has got to be the same thing. I truly like working here, and I truly believe that we're doing great things for patients, and they cost money, and that's okay.
Yeah, and people, patients feel that, right? When somebody doesn't enjoy their job, like I'm constantly like probably just like you. When you go to any kind of customer service thing, you're always analyzing and watching, and there are a lot of people out there who sure don't like their jobs, right? And so when you hear that, and what we would run into again, going back to the legacy, is you get a new staff person who has a ton of energy, is maybe quite extroverted, quite good at their job, good on the phone, all those kind of things, but they wear their heart on the sleeve. So if they feel like the patient is saying that they're wrong, then they start fighting with them. And then I want to walk up and tap them on the shoulder and go, Mrs. Smith has been coming here for 52 years. She wins every time, right? And I've had that issue
Yes.
because now my staff realize that, okay, the Dr. Smalls, Luke and Gina, are always going to take that patient side because they are always right within reason. One of the big ones I keep coming back to that's been really difficult at times, and this is kind of an aside, but because my patient base is getting older and older, sometimes you start to get concerned about some cognitive stuff. And so we get people that don't remember arguing with one of our staff. So we've had to kind of figure this out. And how do we deal with that? And it's one of Luke's patients because he's seeing a lot of those patients with extra birthdays and all those kind of things. So yeah, it's always a challenge. There's always something. It's always changing, right? And again, as I say, I'm excited to have more time to be able to do it right or as best I can.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited about the next chapter in your story, Luke. Congratulations on all your success thus far. And thank
Appreciate
you so much for being a guest on the show today.
Thanks very much. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.